Desperate, a millionaire travels the city in search of his missing son. In the midst of the chaos, a little beggar girl approaches and whispers, "I know what they did to your son." His world falls apart when the girl reveals something that no one else could know. Now he has to decide, trust her or lose the only clue he has. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, tell us which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going. The sun had barely risen when Andre Fischer opened his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. It had been exactly 3 days since his 12-year-old son, Oliver, had disappeared without a trace. The boy's room, once full of life and the typical mess of a preteen, now seemed like a silent mausoleum, preserving the last traces of his presence. Andre got out of bed, his eyes swollen from crying, and the deep circles under his eyes betraying the sleepless nights. His wife, Emma, was still asleep, finally overcome by exhaustion after days of anguish. He watched her for a moment, feeling a pang in his chest when he saw her face marked by dried tears. Walking into the kitchen, Andre mechanically made himself a strong cup of coffee. The familiar aroma filled the room, bringing a false sense of normalcy that soon dissipated. As he took his first sip, his eyes fell on the refrigerator, where a picture of Oliver was smiling down at him. The image, taken during the family's last beach vacation, showed the boy with his hair tousled by the wind, his eyes shining with happiness. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Andre found himself reminiscing about the events that preceded Oliver's disappearance. It had been an ordinary day, a Tuesday like any other. Oliver had gone to school in the morning, carrying his backpack full of books and his lunchbox with Emma's favorite sandwich. That afternoon, when Andrew came home from work, he found Emma in a panic. Oliver had not returned from school. The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls, desperate searches, and the inevitable contact with the police. The authorities began their investigation, but with each passing day, the hope of finding Oliver diminished. Andre shook his head, trying to push away the painful memories. He needed to focus, to stay strong. As he sipped his coffee, he heard a soft sound coming from the front door. Frowning, he approached cautiously. When he opened the door, he saw no one, but his eyes soon fixed on a small piece of paper on the floor. With trembling hands, Andre took the note. The handwriting was uneven, as if it had been written in a hurry. "If you want answers, go to the orphanage on 16th Street. Ask for Victor." Andre's heart raced. It was the first real clue since Oliver's disappearance. He reread the note several times, trying to decipher some hidden meaning in the simple words. Who was Victor? Why an orphanage? And most importantly, who had left that message? Without a second thought, Andre went back inside the house, quickly changed his clothes, and grabbed his car keys. He hesitated for a moment, considering whether he should wake Emma, but decided to let her rest. He didn't want to give her false hope in case this lead didn't lead to anything. As he drove through the still deserted streets of the city, Andre's mind raced with possibilities. Part of him wanted to believe that this could be the key to finding Oliver, but another part of him feared that it would just be another dead end, another disappointment to add to his growing list of frustrations. The orphanage on 16th Street was not a familiar place to Andre. He had been vaguely aware of its existence, but had never had reason to visit. As he approached the address, he noticed that the neighborhood was becoming increasingly run down. Old houses with peeling paint and unkempt gardens lined the narrow streets. Finally, Andre spotted the orphanage building. It was an imposing structure, but it was clearly abandoned. The exposed brick facade was blackened with age, and many of the windows were covered with boards. A shiver ran down his spine as he parked the car in front of the rusty gate. For a moment, Andre hesitated. Was it really wise to enter a place like that based solely on an anonymous note? But the image of Oliver, alone and scared in some unknown place, gave him the courage he needed. He had to do this for his son. With a deep sigh, Andre got out of the car and walked towards the entrance of the orphanage. The gate creaked in protest as he pushed it open, and the sound echoed across the empty courtyard in front of him. Every step he took towards the main Dotto made his heart beat faster. Upon reaching the entrance, Andre noticed that the door was ajar. He hesitated again, but the urgency to find answers drove him forward. He pushed the door slowly, and it opened with an ominous groan. The interior of the orphanage was a shocking contrast to its exterior appearance. Although clearly ancient, the entrance hall was surprisingly clean and tidy. The smell of old wood and paper mingled in the air, creating a peculiar atmosphere. Andrei took a few hesitant steps, his eyes adjusting to the dim light streaming in through the partially covered windows. The walls around him were decorated with childlike drawings, colorful houses, leafy trees, and, oddly enough, a significant number of eyes. The latter seemed to be watching him, following his movements, making him feel uncomfortably exposed. "Hello?" Andrew called, his voice echoing through the empty hallways. "Is anyone here?" There was no immediate response, only the heavy silence of the old building. Andrei walked down the main hallway, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. As he walked deeper into the orphanage, the feeling of being watched intensified. After a few minutes of cautious exploration, Andrei arrived at a large room that appeared to be a common area. To his surprise, he found a group of children sitting on the floor, playing quietly with pieces of crayon. The scene was surreal. Children in a seemingly abandoned building, acting as if their presence there was the most natural thing in the world. Before Andrew could say anything, one of the children stood up. He was a small, thin boy who didn't look more than 8 years old. But there was something in his eyes that made Andrew feel uncomfortable. They were serious, deep eyes that seemed to carry the weight of experiences far beyond his years. The boy looked directly at Andrei and said in a surprisingly firm voice, "You are the father of the missing boy." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Andrei felt his heart race. How could that child know who he was or why he was there? "Yes," Andrei replied, his voice shaking slightly. "I was told to look for Victor. Are you Victor?" The boy nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Andrei's. "They got him," Victor said, his voice low and gravelly. "Just like they got the others." A chill ran down Andrei's spine. The way the boy spoke, the gravity in his voice, all of it made the situation seem even darker than he had imagined. "Who are they?" asked Andrew, leaning closer to the boy. Victor looked around as if he feared being heard by someone or something invisible. Then he took a step forward and whispered, "The shadow people. They don't take just anyone. They choose." The air around Andrei seemed to grow heavier at these words. All his life he had believed that disappearances were caused by ordinary motives, revenge, money, ordinary crimes. But now, for the first time, he felt that he was dealing with something much bigger, something that went beyond his comprehension. "Do you know where my son is?" Andrew asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know where he's been," Victor replied. "But whether he's still there, I don't know." The boy bent down, picking up a piece of red chalk. With precise movements, he drew a strange symbol on the ground. 3 circles connected by thin lines, forming a kind of invisible network. "If you want to find him," Victor continued, "go to the abandoned hotel on the edge of town. But be careful. They know you're looking." Andrei's mind was spinning. It was completely irrational to trust the words of a strange child in such a strange place. But something in the way Victor spoke, in the gravity of his gaze, made him believe that this might be his only chance to find Oliver. Andrei looked again at the symbol drawn on the ground, burning it into his memory. Then, with one last look at Victor and the other silent children, he turned and walked quickly towards the exit of the orphanage. When he reached his car, Andrei stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. What had just happened felt surreal, as if he had entered a parallel world where normal rules did not apply. But one thing was certain. He had to go to the abandoned hotel. It was his only clue, his only hope of finding Oliver. With his hand still shaking slightly, Andrei started the car and headed out of town for the next chapter in this desperate search for his missing son. The morning sun was already high when Andrei reached the edge of town. The abandoned hotel loomed in the distance, a shadowy silhouette against the blue sky. As he got closer, the details of the building became clear. Broken windows, peeling paint, a faded sign that was barely readable. Andrei parked the car a safe distance away, his heart pounding in his chest. Victor's words echoed in his mind. They know you're looking for them. Who were they? And what exactly were they doing with the missing children? With hesitant steps, he approached the hotel entrance. The front door was ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Andrei hesitated for a moment, debating whether he should call the police. But what would he tell them? That he was following the instructions of a mysterious boy in an abandoned orphanage? He shook his head, dismissing the idea. This was something he needed to do alone. Upon entering the hotel lobby, Andrei was immediately enveloped by a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. The smell of mold and neglect was almost palpable. Dust-covered furniture lay scattered about, silent witnesses to a time long gone. Her footsteps echoed across the cracked marble floor as she cautiously advanced. At every moment, she expected to hear some sound, some sign of life, or of her son. But the silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. Andrei reached the reception desk, his eyes scanning the room for any clues. That was when he noticed something strange, a seemingly new ledger book amidst the dust and decay. Intrigued, he opened it. The pages were blank, except for a single entry on the first sheet. There, written in the same shaky handwriting as the note he had received, was a number, 237. A shiver ran down his spine. Was that a room number? Glancing at the broken elevator, Andrei headed for the stairs. The climb was slow and tense, each step creaking under his weight, as if the hotel itself was protesting his presence. On the second floor, Andrei began searching for room 237. The hallways were a maze of closed doors and peeling wallpaper. As he advanced, a strange feeling began to take hold of him, that he was being watched. Turning quickly, Andrei caught sight of a shadow disappearing around the corner of the hallway. "Hello?" he called, his voice shaking slightly. There was no response. Finally, he reached room 237. The door was slightly ajar. With his heart racing, Andrei slowly pushed it open. The room was surprisingly well kept compared to the rest of the hotel. The bed was made, the curtains open to let in the sunlight, and there, sitting in a chair in the corner, was a man. It wasn't Oliver, to Andrei's simultaneous disappointment and relief. The man was tall, thin, and wearing an impeccable suit that contrasted strangely with the decadent surroundings. His eyes, when they turned to Andrei, seemed empty, devoid of any emotion. "Welcome, Mr. Andrei," the man said, his voice soft and controlled. "We've been waiting for you." Andrei felt his legs weaken. How did this stranger know his name? And what did he mean by, "We were waiting"? "Who are you?" Andrew asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where is my son?" The man smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your son is safe for now. As for me, you can call me Mr. Miller. I'm, let's say, a go-between." "Intermediary between who?" Andrei stepped forward, concern giving way to anger. "What do you want with innocent children?" Mr. Miller stood, calmly, smoothing his suit. "Mr. Andrei, you have entered a world much larger than you can imagine. There are forces at play here that are beyond your comprehension." "I don't care about strength or games," exclaimed Andrew. "I just want my son back. And that is exactly why you are here," Mr. Muller replied, his voice still calm. "But before we can discuss Oliver's fate, there is something you need to understand." The man walked to the window, looking out as if contemplating something beyond the visible horizon. "The children we choose are not kidnapped for ordinary reasons, Mr. Andrei. They are special." Andrei frowned in confusion. "Special? What do you mean?" Mr. Müller turned to face him. "Some people are born with unique abilities, Mr. Andrei. Abilities that most people don't even dream of having. Your son is one of those people." Andrei's mind was spinning. Unique abilities? Oliver? He had always known his son was intelligent, creative, but he had never noticed anything out of the ordinary. "I don't understand," said Andrew. "What can Oliver do?" "That," replied Mr. Miller, "is something even he does not know yet. That is why we brought him, to help him discover and develop his potential." Andrei felt a mix of emotions, confusion, fear, but also a twinge of pride. He quickly pushed that feeling away. No matter what this man was saying, Nothing justified what they had done. That doesn't explain why they took him without our consent, Andre argued. Why all the secrecy? Why didn't they tell us? Mr. Müller sighed, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. Mr. Andre, the world is not ready to know about people like your son. Imagine the chaos, the fear that would cause. No, it is better this way. We protect these children while preparing them for their future. What future? Asked Andre, his voice thick with suspicion. A future where they can use their gifts for the greater good, Mr. Müller replied. A future where they can make a difference on a scale you can barely imagine. Andre shook his head, trying to process everything he was hearing. Part of him wanted to believe this was some kind of elaborate joke, but something in the back of his mind told him it was real, terribly real. I want to see my son, Andrew demanded. Now. Mr. Müller nodded slowly. Understandable. But first, Mr. Andre, I need you to understand one thing. Once you see your son, once you fully enter this world, there is no going back. Your life will never be the same again. Andre hesitated for a moment. He thought about Emma, about his normal life, about everything he could lose. But then the image of Oliver, alone and scared, came to his mind. I don't care, Andrew said, his voice firm. Take me to my son. Mr. Müller smiled again, this time with a hint of approval in his empty eyes. Very well, Mr. Andre, follow me. As he followed the mysterious man out of the room, Andre couldn't help but feel like he was crossing a point of no return. Whatever lay ahead, he knew his life and Oliver's would never be the same again. The hallway seemed endless as they walked, Mr. Müller in the lead, moving with an almost supernatural grace. Andre tried to absorb everything he had learned, his mind a jumble of unanswered questions. Finally, they reached a door at the end of the hallway. Mr. Müller stopped, turning to Andre with a serious look. Remember, Mr. Andre, what you are about to see will change your perception of reality forever. Are you ready? Andre swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. With a determined nod, he replied, I'm ready. Open the door. Mr. Müller turned the handle, and the door opened, onto a world Andre could never have imagined. The door opened, revealing a scene that made Andre question his own sanity. The room in front of him looked nothing like the rest of the rundown hotel. It was a large space, lit by a blue light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. High-tech equipment took up much of the space, with holographic screens floating in the air, displaying incomprehensible data and graphs. In the center of the room, sitting in a chair that looked like something out of a science fiction movie, was Oliver. The boy stared at one of the holographic screens, his eyes moving quickly as if he were reading something at superhuman speed. Oliver! Exclaimed Andrew, running towards his son. The boy turned, his eyes widening in surprise and fear. Dad, what are you doing here? Before Andre could reach Oliver, an invisible barrier stopped him. He turned, confused and furious. To Mr. Müller, what is this? Let me get to my son. Mr. Müller remained impassive. Calm down, Mr. Andre. Your son is in the middle of a delicate process. Interrupting him now could be dangerous. Dangerous? Andre looked back at Oliver, who now looked nervous and uneasy. Oliver, are you okay? Did they hurt you? Oliver shook his head. No, Dad, I'm fine. In fact, I've never felt better. Andre frowned in confusion. What do you mean? It was Mr. Müller who replied, Your son is discovering the true extent of his abilities. Mr. Andre, Oliver has an extraordinary gift. He can process and comprehend information at a speed unimaginable to an ordinary human being. Andre stared at the holographic screens, noticing now that the data was flowing at a speed he couldn't keep up with. Do you understand all this, Oliver? The boy nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. It's amazing, Dad. It's like I can see patterns in everything, connections that no one else notices. I can understand things that once seemed impossible. The pride Andre felt was quickly replaced by concern. But why did it have to be like this? Why didn't they tell us? Why did they take him from us? Mr. Müller stepped forward. As I explained, before Mr. Andre, the world is not ready for people with Oliver's abilities. Imagine the chaos that would ensue if people knew that there were individuals capable of processing information in this way. Governments, corporations, everyone would want to exploit this gift. "And you are different?" Andre asked, his voice full of suspicion. "We protect and guide," Mr. Miller replied. "We help people like Oliver develop their skills in a safe and ethical way." Oliver interrupted. "Dad, I know it sounds scary, but they really are helping me. I can do things I never thought possible." Andre looked at his son, seeing a maturity in his eyes that wasn't there before. "But what about your mother? Your normal life, don't you miss that?" Oliver hesitated for a moment. "I miss you guys, of course, but this is bigger than me, Dad. With what I can do, I could help so many people." Mr. Miller gently touched Andre on the shoulder. "Mr. Andre, I understand your concern, but think of the possibilities. Your son could revolutionize entire fields of science, solving problems that have plagued humanity for centuries." Andre felt the weight of the situation fall on his shoulders. He looked at Oliver, seeing not just his little son anymore, but someone with immense and frightening potential. "What now?" asked Andre, his voice low. "What happens from here?" Mr. Miller smiled slightly. "That, Mr. Andre, is largely up to you. We can continue Oliver's training, helping him to fully develop his abilities, or pressed Andre, or we can make you forget all this. Take Oliver back home, suppress his abilities, let him live a normal life." Silence fell over the room. Andrew looked at Oliver, seeing the anxiety in his son's eyes. "What do you want, Oliver?" Oliver took a deep breath. "I want to stay, Dad. I know it's hard to understand, but I feel like I can make a difference here, that I can be more than I ever imagined." Andre felt his heart sink. The thought of losing his son to this strange, unknown world was terrifying. But at the same time, how could he deny Oliver the chance to reach his true potential? "What about us?" Andrew asked. "Your mother and I, do we just have to accept that you're gone?" Mr. Miller interjected. "There are options, Mr. Andre. Oliver could maintain limited contact, supervised visits, or you and your wife could join us in a way. Not as active agents, but as part of our supportive community." Andre's head was spinning with the possibilities. Keeping his son would mean abandoning everything he knew, delving into a world of secrets and powers beyond his comprehension. But letting him go, the thought was almost unbearable. "I need time," Andre said finally. "I need to talk to Emma." "Think about all this." Mr. Miller nodded understandingly. "Of course, but understand, Mr. Andre, that once you leave here, you can't just go back. The decision you make will be final." Andre looked at Oliver, feeling a mixture of pride, fear, and deep sadness. His son was growing up in a way he could never have predicted. "Oliver," Andrew said softly, "are you sure about this? Really sure?" Oliver smiled, a smile that mixed the innocence of the child he was with, the wisdom of what he was becoming. "I do, Dad. I know it's scary, but I feel like it's right, that it's what I'm supposed to do." Andre closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision he would have to make. When he opened them again, he saw Mr. Miller and Oliver looking at him expectantly. "I'm going home," Andrew said finally. "I'll talk to Emma, and then we'll make a decision." Mr. Miller nodded. "Very well. You will have 48 hours. After that, we will need your final response." Andre took one last look at Oliver, etching every detail of his son's face into his memory. "I love you, son. No matter what happens, never forget that." "I love you too, Dad," Oliver replied, his voice breaking. With a heavy heart, Andre followed Mr. Muller out of the room, leaving Oliver behind. As they walked back through the now eerily silent hotel corridors, Andre tried to gather his thoughts. How would they explain all of this to Emma? How could they make a decision that would change their lives forever? And most importantly, how could they be sure they were doing the right thing for Oliver? Arriving at the hotel entrance, Andre turned to Mr. Muller. "How will I find them again?" The man smiled enigmatically. Don't worry, Mr. Andre. When the time is right, we will find you." With these words, Andre left the hotel, walking towards his car. The afternoon sun shone brightly, contrasting with the darkness he felt in his heart. As he drove home for a conversation that would change the course of their lives, Andre couldn't help but wonder, what world had he just entered? And what would be the ultimate price of learning truths he should never have discovered? The journey home seemed endless for Andre. Every mile he traveled was accompanied by a torrent of conflicting thoughts and emotions. How could he explain to Emma what he had discovered? How could they make a decision that would affect not only their lives, but potentially the future of humanity? When he arrived home, Andre found Emma in the living room, her eyes red and swollen from crying so much. She jumped up when she saw him come in. "Andre, where have you been? Have you found any clues about Oliver?" He hesitated, the words stuck in his throat. How could he begin to explain something he himself barely understood? "Emma, sit down," he said softly. "I have something to tell you, and, well, it's not going to be easy to believe." Over the next few minutes, Andre narrated his surreal journey. The mysterious note, the abandoned orphanage, the hotel that hid unimaginable secrets, and finally, the reunion with Oliver. With each word, Emma's face changed from disbelief to shock and then to a complex mix of relief, fear, and confusion. "Are you telling me," she said slowly, "that our son has superpowers?" Andre shook his head. "Not exactly superpowers, more like an extraordinary mental ability. He can process information in a way that no normal human being could." Emma stood up, pacing nervously around the room. "This is crazy, Andre. Completely impossible. How can we be sure this isn't some kind of trick, an elaborate trap?" "I saw it with my own eyes, Emma," Andre replied, his voice tired but firm. "Oliver was there doing things that defy logic. And he wants to stay. He believes he can make a difference." Silence fell over them, heavy and oppressive. Emma finally sat back down, her hands shaking slightly. "What now? What do we do?" Andre sighed deeply. "We have to make a decision. We can leave Oliver there, let him develop these abilities, or we can bring him back, try to resume our normal lives." "Normal?" Emma let out a bitter laugh. "How can anything be normal after that?" "There is another option," Andre continued, hesitantly. "We could join them, not as whatever they are, but as support for Oliver. We would be there for him, but we would have to leave everything behind." The couple looked at each other, years of love and trust reflected in their eyes, now clouded by uncertainty about the future. "How much time do we have to decide?" Emma asked. 48 hours, Andrew replied. "After that, we'll have to give a final answer." The next few hours were a whirlwind of arguments, tears, and moments of contemplative silence. Andre and Emma reviewed every aspect of their lives, their jobs, their homes, their friends and family, everything they would have to give up if they chose to follow Oliver on this new journey. "What if it's dangerous?" Emma asked at one point. "What if they're just using Oliver for some dark purpose?" Andre didn't have a clear answer. "I don't know, Emma, but I saw our son there. He looked fulfilled, like he'd found his purpose." As the night wore on, the reality of the situation began to set in. No matter what they chose, their lives would never be the same again. "Maybe we should get some sleep," Andre suggested, noticing the tiredness in Emma's eyes. "Tomorrow, with clearer minds, we can make our decision." Emma nodded, though they both knew sleep would be hard to come by that night. The next morning, after a restless night, Andre and Emma found themselves in the kitchen, untouched cups of coffee in front of them. "I dreamed about Oliver," Emma said softly. "He was doing amazing things, helping people, but he was far away. From us, so far away." Andre took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know. I can't stop thinking about all the possibilities either. The good he could do, but also all the things we would be leaving behind." They sat in silence for a few moments, the ticking of the clock on the wall constantly reminding them of the time that was running out. "Andrew," Emma said finally, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "I think we know what we have to do." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I guess so." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Phone calls were made, excuses invented, hasty arrangements made. To the outside world, the Fisher family was suddenly moving due to an unexpected job opportunity. The reality, of course, was much more complex. As the 48-hour deadline approached, Andrew and Emma stood in the living room of their home, packed, suitcases at their feet. They looked around, taking in every detail of the home they were about to leave. "Are we doing the right thing?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Andre held her close, feeling the weight of the decision in every fiber of his being. "I don't know if it's the right thing, love, but it's the only thing we can do. Oliver needs us, and we need to be there for him." At that moment, as if summoned by his words, there was a knock on the door. Andre opened it, revealing Mr. Miller as impeccable and enigmatic as before. "I see you've made your decision," he said, his gaze sweeping over the suitcases and the couple's determined faces. Andre nodded. "Yes, we'll go with you. For Oliver." Mr. Miller smiled slightly. "Excellent. I must warn you, however, that the road ahead will not be easy. The world you are about to enter is vast, complex, and at times dangerous." Emma stepped forward, her voice surprisingly firm. "It doesn't matter, our son is there, and that's where we're supposed to be." "Very well," replied Mr. Muller. "Shall we go then?" With one last look at the house that had been their home for so many years, Andre and Emma picked up their bags and followed Mr. Muller outside. A sleek black car was waiting for them, its tinted windows concealing the interior. As they climbed into the vehicle, Andre couldn't help but think about how drastically their lives had changed in just a few days. From desperate parents searching for their missing son, they were now embarking on a journey into a world of secrets and extraordinary abilities. The car began to move, taking them away from everything they knew, to the uncertain future that awaited them, to Oliver. "Ready?" Mr. Muller asked, his enigmatic gaze reflected in the rearview mirror. Andre and Emma clasped hands, seeking strength from each other. "Ready," they replied in unison, and so the Fisher family left behind the world they knew, plunging headlong into a universe of possibilities and dangers they could never have imagined. What awaited them beyond the horizon was a mystery, but one thing was certain: they would face together as a family whatever fate had in store for them. The car glided silently down the road, leaving behind the city that Andre and Emma called home. As the urban landscape gave way to lush green fields and then to dense forest, the couple felt that they were crossing not only geographical boundaries, but also the boundaries of the reality they knew. Mr. Muller sat silently in the front seat, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Andre and Emma exchanged occasional glances, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation on their faces. After what seemed like hours, the car began to slow down, turning onto a dirt road barely visible between the trees. They continued for a few more minutes until they reached a clearing where a surprising structure stood. At first glance, it looked like an old mansion with its stone facade and tall windows. But upon closer inspection, futuristic details revealed themselves. Camouflaged solar panels on the roof, discrete antennas, and a barely noticeable force field that seemed to envelop the entire property. "Welcome to the Institute, Mr. Muller," announced, parking the car. "This will be your new home." Andre and Emma stepped out of the vehicle, amazed at the sight before them. The main entrance opened, and out stepped a familiar figure, Oliver. "Mom, Dad!" the boy shouted, running towards them. The hug that followed was intense, filled with emotion. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she held her son, as if she feared he might disappear again. "You came," Oliver said, his voice breaking. "I knew you would." Andre ruffled his son's hair, smiling despite the tears in his own eyes. "Of course we came, champ. We're family, aren't we?" Mr. Muller approached, his expression softened by a faint smile. "Oliver has done exceptionally well in his training. I think you will be impressed with his progress." As they entered the Institute, Andre and Emma were overcome with the feeling that they were entering another world. The interior was a fascinating mix of classical architecture and cutting-edge technology. Holograms floated in the air, displaying incomprehensible data and images. People of all ages walked the halls, some in animated conversation, others focused on futuristic tablets. "This is the heart of our operation," Mr. Miller explained as he led them through. "Here, individuals with special abilities like Oliver are trained and mentored to use their gifts for the benefit of humanity." "And how many people like Oliver are there? Emma asked, still holding her son's hand. More than you might think, Mr. Muller replied, but still a precious minority, each with unique abilities that if used correctly could change the course of history. They arrived in a large room that looked like a cross between a laboratory and a classroom. Several children and teenagers were engaged in different activities, some manipulating complex holograms, others apparently in deep meditation. This is the main training room, Oliver said, his face alight with excitement. This is where we learn to control and expand our abilities. Andre watched, fascinated, as a girl no more than 10 years old manipulated molecules in a three-dimensional hologram, reconfiguring their structure with a simple movement of her hands. What exactly are you doing here? He asked, turning to Mr. Muller. We prepare these young people for the challenges the world will face, the man replied. Climate change, pandemics, economic crises. With their unique skills, they can predict, prevent, and solve problems that most people don't even know exist. Emma frowned. But why all the secrecy? Why not work openly with governments and institutions? Mr. Muller sighed. Unfortunately, not everyone would see these abilities as a gift. Many would fear them, others would try to exploit them. Secrecy protects us and allows us to work without unwanted interference. The next few hours were a whirlwind of new information and surprising revelations. Andre and Emma learned about the history of the Institute, how for centuries they had been identifying and training individuals with extraordinary abilities. Oliver guided them through the complex, showing them advanced laboratories, virtual libraries with knowledge beyond common comprehension, and meditation rooms where the young people learned to focus and expand their mental abilities. And where do we fit into all of this? Asked Andre, feeling simultaneously amazed and overwhelmed. You are essential, Mr. Muller replied. These young people, as extraordinary as they are still children. They need guidance, love, and family support. That's where you come in. He led them to a residential wing, showing them a spacious and comfortable apartment. This will be your new home. You will have access to all the common areas of the Institute and will be able to actively participate in the education and well-being of not only Oliver, but all the children here. As Andre and Emma took it all in, Oliver watched them anxiously. So you're staying, right? Do you understand why this is important? The couple exchanged a look, years of mutual understanding passing between them in an instant. Emma knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with Oliver. Yes, dear. Let's stay. This is our new life now together. Andre nodded, placing his hand on his son's shoulder. I'm not going to lie, it's going to take some getting used to, but we're here for you and for all these amazing kids. The relief and joy on Oliver's face were palpable. He hugged his parents again, tighter this time. Mr. Muller watched the scene with a slight smile. Excellent. Tomorrow we will begin your formal orientation. There is much to learn and time, as always, is precious. As the man walked away, leaving the Fisher family to settle into their new home, Andre couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Fear of the unknown, yes, but also a growing sense of purpose. Looking out the window at the vast complex of the Institute, he thought of all the lives that could be impacted by the work happening there. How his son, and so many other extraordinary children, could shape the future of humanity. What are you thinking about? Emma asked, joining him at the window. Andre smiled, pulling her close. I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, we're on the beginning of something truly amazing. As the sun set over the Institute, bathing everything in golden hues, the Fisher family prepared for their first night in this new world of endless possibilities. What the future held, no one could say for sure. But one thing was clear. Together, they would face whatever challenge lay ahead. And so, with hearts full of hope and minds open to the extraordinary, they took the first steps on their new journey, ready to unravel the mysteries and wonders that awaited them in the heart of the Institute. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and discoveries for the Fisher family. Andre and Emma dove headfirst into life at the Institute, determined to understand and support not only Oliver, but all the extraordinary children who were now part of their new world. Each morning brought new surprises. Andre found himself fascinated by the technological advances that permeated every aspect of the Institute. In one of the research rooms, he observed a group of teenagers working on a water purification project that could revolutionize access to clean water in arid regions of the planet. "It's amazing, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. Andrei turned and saw a middle-aged woman with bright eyes and a kind smile. "I'm Dr. Lena, head of the Environmental Sciences Department." Andrei squeezed her hand, still in awe of what he saw. "Andrei Fisher. I'm still trying to process all of this." Lena laughed softly. "We all go through that adjustment phase, but you'd be surprised how quickly the extraordinary becomes normal here." Meanwhile, Emma found her place in the medical wing of the institute. With her background as a nurse, she quickly became a comforting presence for the children who sometimes felt overwhelmed by her abilities. One particularly hectic afternoon, Emma was babysitting an 8-year-old girl named Laura, who had the ability to sense other people's emotions. The girl was huddled in a corner, shaking. "It's okay, honey," Emma said softly, moving closer. "What are you feeling?" Laura looked at her with teary eyes. It's too much. I can feel Liam's sadness because he misses home, Anna's frustration because she can't control her telekinesis, Alexander's fear of what he might do." Emma sat down next to her, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Take a deep breath with me, Laura. Remember what Dr. Sophia taught you. Visualize a bubble around you, filtering all those emotions." Slowly, Laura's breathing calmed down. Emma felt a wave of empathy and admiration for the courage of these children. Oliver, meanwhile, was flourishing in his training. His ability to process information at superhuman speeds made him an exceptional student in virtually every subject. One morning, Andrei found him in the virtual library, absorbing information from dozens of books at once. "Hey, champ," Andrei called. "How's it going?" Oliver smiled, his eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, this is amazing. I'm learning about quantum physics, neuroplasticity, and string theory all at the same time." Andrei ruffled his son's hair, feeling a mixture of pride and a pang of something else. Fear? Concern? It was hard not to feel a little intimidated by Oliver's potential. As the weeks passed, the Fisher family became increasingly integrated into the life of the institute. They attended weekly meetings with other families, sharing experiences and supporting each other on this unique journey. It was during one of these meetings that Andrei and Emma met the Ricci's, Michael and Clara, parents of Mia, a 14-year-old girl with the ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields. "At first we thought she was just accidentally burning electronics," Michael said with a laugh. "It was a relief when the institute found us and explained what was really going on." Clara nodded, adding, "But it's still a challenge, isn't it? Balancing this extraordinary life with the desire for normalcy." Emma immediately identified with the sentiment. "Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, bringing Oliver into this very intense world." "I think we all have those moments of doubt," interjected Mr. Miller, who had silently joined the group. "But always remember, what we do here is not just for the good of our children, but for the good of all humanity." Mr. Miller's words echoed in Andrei and Emma's minds in the days that followed. They began to notice more clearly the projects underway at the Institute, from advanced research into disease cures to systems for predicting natural disasters. One evening, while the Fisher family was having dinner in their apartment, Oliver suddenly became very quiet, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "Oliver," Emma called, worried, "is everything okay, son?" The boy blinked several times, coming back to reality. I think I saw something important." Andrei leaned forward, intrigued. "What did you see, Oliver?" "Numbers, data, patterns," Oliver said, his voice distant. "I think I just predicted an economic crisis that's going to happen in 2 years." Silence fell over the table. Andrei and Emma exchanged looks of astonishment and concern. "We need to speak to Mr. Mueller," Andrei said finally. The next morning, the family met with Mr. Mueller in his office. As Oliver explained his vision, detailing complex economic patterns and geopolitical events, Andrei noticed a subtle change in Mr. Mueller's normally impassive expression. "That's extraordinary," the man said when Oliver finished. "If we're right, we could prevent a global financial collapse." Emma squeezed Oliver's hand. What does this mean for Oliver? For us? Mr. Miller stood up, walking to the window. It means that Oliver's training is progressing faster than we expected. It also means that we will need to speed up certain preparations. What kind of preparations? Asked Andrew, feeling a twinge of apprehension. Mr. Miller turned. To them, his gaze intense. The world out there is changing rapidly, Mr. and Mrs. Fisher. Conflicts, environmental crises, uncontrolled technological advances. We need to be ready not just to react, but to actively shape the future. He paused, looking directly at Oliver. Your son, along with a few other exceptional children, may be the key to ensuring not only the survival, but the progress of humanity. Andre felt a shiver run down his spine. What exactly are you suggesting? I am suggesting, Mr. Muller replied calmly, that it is time we took the training of Oliver and the others to the next level. It is time to prepare them not just to predict the future, but to actively shape it. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with implications. Andre and Emma looked at Oliver, who looked simultaneously excited and apprehensive. What if we say no? Emma asked, her voice shaking slightly. Mr. Miller smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. You will always have a choice, Mrs. Fisher, but I ask you to consider it carefully. The stakes here are much greater than any of us. As they left Mr. Muller's office, the Fisher family found themselves at a crossroads. The path ahead was uncertain, full of promise and danger. The implications of what Oliver might do, of what he might become, were both thrilling and terrifying. Andre and Emma exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. They had embarked on this journey out of love for their son, but now they found themselves in the middle of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. The question that hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone, was, how far would they be willing to go? And what would be the consequences of their choices? As they walked back to their apartment, the weight of these questions stayed with them, along with the growing sense that their lives and possibly the fate of the world were about to change forever. The days that followed the meeting with Mr. Muller were tense for the Fisher family. Andre and Emma found themselves caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, endlessly debating Oliver's future and the implications of Mr. Muller's words. One particularly restless night, while Oliver slept, the couple found themselves on the balcony of their apartment, looking out at the soft lights that illuminated the Institute complex. I can't help but think, Emma began, her voice low and worried, that perhaps we've gotten ourselves into something bigger than we can control. Andre nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I know. When we came here, we only thought about helping Oliver understand his abilities. Now, it seems like the fate of the world is at stake. What if we're making the wrong decision? Emma asked, turning to face her husband. What if, in trying to protect Oliver, we're actually putting him in even greater danger? Before Andre could respond, they were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. To his surprise, it was Dr. Lena, the scientist Andre had met weeks ago. Sorry to intrude, she said, her face etched with concern, but I felt I needed to talk to you, in private. Intrigued and a little apprehensive, Andre and Emma invited Lena in. They sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. Lena took a deep breath before beginning. I know Mr. Muller spoke to you about stepping up, Oliver's training, and I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed by all of this. You have no idea, Emma muttered. Lena nodded understandingly. What you need to understand is that not everything in the Institute is exactly as it seems. Andre leaned forward, alarmed. What do you mean? The work we do here is important, vital even, Lena continued. But there are factions within the Institute, people with different views on how our discoveries and the abilities of these children should be used. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of different visions? Lena glanced nervously at the door before replying. Quietly, some believe we should be more proactive in shaping world events. Not just predicting and reacting, but actively manipulating the course of history. Andre paled. That sounds dangerously close to world control, Lena added. Yes, some see it that way. They argue that with the power we have, it is our responsibility to guide humanity even if it means making difficult decisions on everyone's behalf. "And Mr. Miller?" asked Emma, dreading the answer. Lena hesitated. He's been leaning more and more toward that line of thinking in recent years. "That's why I'm here. You need to know what you're getting into before you agree to anything." Silence fell over the room as Andre and Emma absorbed this bombshell of information. Everything they had learned and experienced in the past, few weeks now seemed tinged with a shadow of doubt and danger. "What can we do?" Andre asked finally, his voice thick with concern. Lena stood up, walking to the window. "There is a group of us who believe in a different path. We want to use our skills and knowledge to help humanity, but in a more subtle way, respecting free will and the natural course of history." She turned to face them. "Oliver is special, even by the Institute's standards. His potential is, well, frightening. And there are those who would like to use that potential for their own ends." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. "So, what do you suggest? That we run away? That we abandon all of this?" Lena shook her head. "No. Running away now would be dangerous, both for you and for Oliver. What I suggest is that you stay alert, watch, learn, and when the time comes, be ready to take a stand." Andre frowned. "A position? What kind of position?" "One that could determine the future of not just Oliver, but every child here, and possibly the world," Lena replied seriously. Before they could further their conversation, they heard a noise coming from Oliver's room. Lena quickly said goodbye, leaving Andre and Emma with more questions than answers. When they checked on Oliver, they found the boy sitting up in bed, his eyes wide and bright in the darkness. "Mom? Dad?" he said, his voice shaking slightly. I had another dream. But this time it was different. I saw terrible things happening, and we were part of it." Andre and Emma exchanged worried glances before sitting down next to their son. "What kind of things, dear?" Emma asked softly. Oliver hesitated, as if afraid of his own words. I've seen people using powers like ours to control others. I've seen wars started and ended with a thought. I've seen the world change in ways that shouldn't be possible." Andre placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "It was just a dream, Oliver. Doesn't mean it's going to happen for real." But even as he said this, Andre couldn't help but think about Lena's words. Was Oliver's dream just that, a dream? Or was it a vision of a possible future? A future they needed to avoid at all costs? Oliver looked at his parents, his eyes filled with wisdom beyond his years. "It wasn't just a dream, Dad. I know that. And I know we have to do something about it." In that moment, facing their son's determined gaze and carrying the weight of Lena's revelations, Andre and Emma knew they had reached a turning point. The choices they made from that point on would affect not only their lives, but potentially the fate of all humanity. "What should we do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Andre looked from Oliver to Emma, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I don't know exactly what we'll do," he said finally, "but I know we'll do it together. As a family," Oliver nodded, a small smile forming on his lips despite the gravity of the situation. "Together," he repeated. As the night wore on, the Fisher family stood together, facing an uncertain future but determined to navigate these turbulent waters with courage and integrity. The path ahead was cloudy and fraught with danger, but they had each other. And, for now, that would have to be enough. The days following Lena's conversation and Oliver's disturbing vision were marked by palpable tension for the Fisher family. Andre and Emma found themselves watching every interaction, every conversation at the Institute, with a new critical eye, searching for signs of the factions Lena had mentioned. One particularly busy morning, Andre was in the Institute's library, researching the organization's history, when he noticed Michael Ricci, Mia's father, approaching with a worried expression. "Andrew," Michael said quietly, "can we talk in private?" Intrigued, Andre nodded, following Michael to a secluded corner of the library. "Something's wrong," Michael began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mia, she had a vision, something about a project called Global Harmony. And ever since then, Mr. Muller has shown an unusual interest in her. Andre felt a shiver run down his spine. Oliver has also been having visions recently, disturbing visions. The two men exchanged worried looks. Do you think... Michael hesitated. Do you think our children are in danger? Before Andre could respond, they were interrupted by the sudden arrival of Dr. Sophia, the Institute's psychologist. "Ah, it's so good to meet you here," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Muller would like to speak with both of you and your wives. It's about a new training program for Oliver and Mia." Andre and Michael exchanged quick glances before following Dr. Sophia. Along the way, they met Emma and Clara, who looked equally apprehensive. The conference room they were led to was spacious and modern, with a large oval table in the center. Mr. Muller was waiting for them, his face a mask of professional calm. "Ah, welcome," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "We have much to discuss." As everyone settled in, Andre couldn't help but notice the tension in the air. Mr. Muller began to talk about a new advanced training program for Oliver and Mia, describing it as a unique opportunity to develop the children's full potential. This program, Mr. Muller explained, will allow Oliver and Mia to not only predict future events with greater accuracy, but also learn how to actively influence those events. Emma leaned forward, her voice shaking with worry. "Influence? What do you mean?" Mr. Muller smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Imagine a world where we can prevent wars before they start, avert natural disasters, guide humanity toward a brighter future. That is what we are offering your children, the chance to be true agents of global change." Andre felt his stomach churn. Mr. Muller's words echoed dangerously close to Lena's warnings. "What if we don't want our children to participate in this program?" Clara asked, her voice thick with apprehension. Mr. Muller's smile faltered for a moment. "I understand your concerns, but I ask that you consider it carefully. What we offer here is a unique opportunity. To refuse it would be, well, it would be a shame." The veiled tone of threat did not go unnoticed by anyone present. Andre exchanged quick glances with Emma, seeing in her the same fear and determination that he felt. "We need time to think," Andrew said finally. "It's too big a decision to make right away." Mr. Muller nodded slowly. Of course, take your time. But don't delay too long. The future, after all, waits for no one." As they left the meeting room, the two families found themselves in an empty hallway, the expressions on their faces reflecting the gravity of the situation. "This isn't right," Michael murmured. "There's something very wrong going on here." Emma nodded, her voice low but firm. "We need to do something. We can't let them use our children like this." It was at that moment that Lena appeared, as if from the shadows. "Come with me," she said urgently. "There's something you need to see." The group followed Lena through the Institute's little-used corridors, down elevators they didn't know existed, until they reached an underground area that appeared to have been recently excavated. "What is this place?" Clara asked, looking around. Nervously, Lena stopped before a massive metal door. "This," she said, typing in a complex code, "is where the real work of the Institute happens." The door hissed open, revealing a room filled with advanced equipment and screens, displaying real-time data from across the planet. In the center of the room, a three-dimensional hologram of the Earth's globe rotated slowly. "My God," whispered Andrew, his eyes wide with astonishment. Lena turned to face them, her face serious. "What you've seen so far is just the surface. The true purpose of the Institute, or at least certain influential members, goes far beyond simply predicting and reacting to future events." She pointed to the hologram of the globe. "With the combined abilities of children like Oliver and Mia, they believe they can not only predict the future, but actively shape it, manipulate events on a global scale to create what they call a guided chaotopia." Emma felt her legs go weak. "But this is crazy. It's practically trying to play God." Lena nodded gravely. "Exactly. And that's why we need to stop them. But we can't do it alone." She looked intently at each of them. "You are not the only concerned parents here. There are others who share our concerns, others who want to protect their children. and the world from the dangers of this megalomaniacal plan. Andre stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. "What can we do?" Lena smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "We can fight. We can expose the truth. And we can offer an alternative. A path that uses these children's gifts for good without compromising their freedom or the world's." The Fisher and Ricci families exchanged glances, years of friendship and trust passing between them in an instant. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice thick with determination. "We're with you. What do we need to do?" Lena nodded, her face lighting up with a mixture of relief and determination. "First, we need to gather more allies. Then we can begin planning our resistance. It won't be easy, and it will certainly be dangerous. But it's the only way to protect our children and the future of humanity." As the group began to discuss strategies and plans, Andrew couldn't help but think about Oliver, about how his life had changed so drastically in such a short amount of time. He made a silent promise to his son. They would do whatever it took to protect him, to ensure that his extraordinary gift was used for good, not for manipulation and control. The coming battle would be difficult, perhaps the most difficult they had ever faced. But united with the truth and the love for their children as their motivation, they were ready to face whatever the future held. And so, deep within the Institute, a resistance began to take shape. A resistance that could very well determine the fate of not only Oliver and Mia, but the entire world. The days following Lena's revelation were a whirlwind of secret activity and careful planning. The resistance, as it came to be called, grew quietly in the shadows of the Institute. Andre and Emma, along with the Riccis and other parents and staff who shared their concerns, worked tirelessly to build a network of trusted allies. On a particularly tense night, the group gathered in an abandoned laboratory in the lower levels of the Institute. Lena led the meeting, her low but firm voice echoing in the confined space. "We have been able to identify 3 more families who are willing to join us," she said. "And we have 2 senior scientists who question the ethics of the Global Harmony Project." Andre nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "It's a good start, but we're still few compared to the reach of Mr. Muller and his allies." Michael, who was examining blueprints of the Institute on a tablet, looked up. "The problem isn't just numbers, it's access. Muller and his group have control over the key systems, over security. How can we compete with that?" It was at this point that Emma, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "Maybe we don't need to compete directly. What if, instead of trying to overthrow their system, we create our own?" All eyes turned to her, intrigued. Encouraged, Emma continued, "Our children have extraordinary abilities. If we could create a safe environment for them to develop these abilities ethically, without the pressure and manipulation of Mr. Muller." Lena's face lit up with understanding. "An institute within the institute. Brilliant, Emma." The idea quickly gained traction. The group spent the next few hours hatching an audacious plan to create a parallel training and research network, hidden under the noses of Mr. Muller and his allies. Meanwhile, upstairs, Oliver and Mia were having their own secret meeting. The 2 young people, bonded by their unique abilities and the weight of expectations placed upon them, had developed a close friendship. "Do you think our parents know?" Mia asked, her voice a nervous whisper. Oliver frowned, concentrating. "About what's happening to us, or about what Mr. Muller really wants?" "Both, I think," Mia replied. Oliver sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know, but I feel like something big is about to happen. In my visions, I see conflict, difficult choices." Mia nodded, understanding perfectly. Her own electromagnetic manipulation abilities had intensified in the past few weeks, sometimes in ways that frightened her. "Oliver," she said hesitantly, "have you ever thought, what if we didn't use our powers? What if we just said no?" The look Oliver gave her friend was a mixture of understanding and resignation. "I've thought about that. But you know as well as I do that it's not that simple. Our abilities are part of who we are, and the knowledge we have, we can't just ignore it." Before Mia could respond, they both felt a subtle change in the air. It was as if an invisible electric current had passed through them. "Did you feel that?" Mia asked, her eyes wide. Oliver nodded, his expression serious. "Something changed, I don't know what, but the future I was seeing, it shifted." On the lower levels, oblivious to the children's conversation, the resistance group was finalizing their initial plans. Andre, who had taken a leadership role alongside Lena, addressed the group. "What we are about to do will not be easy. We will be risking everything. Our positions here, possibly our freedoms. But we are doing it for our children and for the future we believe they deserve." Emma took her husband's hand, giving it a comforting squeeze. "We are not alone in this fight. We have each other and we have the truth on our side." Lena stepped forward, her face a mask of determination. "Starting tomorrow, we begin implementing our plan. Remember, caution is essential. Mr. Miller and his allies cannot suspect anything until we are ready." As the group dispersed, each quietly returning to their rooms and positions in the Institute, Andre couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and excitement. They were about to plunge into unknown and dangerous waters. Back at their apartment, Andre and Emma found Oliver awake, waiting for them. The look on his son's face, a mix of knowledge and concern, made Andre realize that they couldn't keep Oliver in the dark much longer. "Son," Andrew began, sitting down next to Oliver, "there's something we need to tell you." Oliver looked from Andre to Emma, his eyes shining with a wisdom beyond his years. "It's about the resistance, isn't it? About what you're planning against Mr. Miller." Emma gasped in surprise. "How did you—" A small smile formed on Oliver's lips. "Mom, Dad, you forget sometimes what I can do. I don't know the details, but I can feel the changes, the decisions being made, and I want you to know I'm with you." Andre felt a lump form in his throat. The pride he felt for his son at that moment was almost overwhelming. "Oliver, what we're about to do is dangerous. We don't want to put you at risk." Oliver shook his head, his expression serious. "I'm already at risk, Father. We all are. What Mr. Miller plans, it's not right. And if there's one thing I've learned from you two, it's that we must fight for what's right, no matter how hard it is." Emma pulled Oliver into a tight hug, silent tears streaming down her face. "My brave son," she whispered. That night, as the Fisher family finally fell asleep, united in their determination to face the challenges ahead, a sense of change hung in the air. At the Institute, in the silent hallways and darkened laboratories, the wheels of destiny began to turn. The battle for the future, not just for Oliver and the other extraordinary children, but potentially for all of humanity, was about to begin. And no one, not even Oliver with his visions of the future, could predict exactly how it would end. The following weeks were a test of nerve and determination for everyone involved in the resistance. Andre and Emma, along with their allies, worked tirelessly behind the scenes, carefully implementing their plan to create a parallel network within the Institute. Lena had gained access to an abandoned section deep within the complex, which quickly became the unofficial headquarters of the resistance. There, far from the watchful eyes of Mr. Miller and his followers, the group began to establish its own training and research program. One particularly busy afternoon, Andre was in this secret space working on an encrypted communication system when Michael walked in, his face pale with worry. "Andre," he said, his voice low and urgent, "we have a problem. Mr. Miller is planning a demonstration of the Global Harmony Project for the Institute's Board of Directors, and he wants to use Oliver and Mia." Andre felt his heart race. "When?" "In 3 days," Michael replied. "They intend to show how children's skills can be used to guide global events." The news spread quickly among the resistance members, causing a wave of panic and urgency. Lena called an emergency meeting that very night. "We cannot allow this demonstration to happen," she declared, her tone firm as she addressed the assembled group. "If Mr. Muller can convince the board, our time to act will be drastically reduced." Emma, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. "What if we used this to our advantage? If we could expose Mr. Muller's true plans during this demonstration?" Emma's suggestion sparked a heated debate. Some argued that it was too risky, Others saw it as a unique opportunity. In the midst of the debate, Oliver and Mia, who had insisted on attending the meeting, exchanged meaningful glances. "We can do this," Oliver said, his calm but determined voice cutting through the adults' voices. "Mia and I. We can use the demonstration to reveal the truth." All eyes turned to the two children. Mia nodded in agreement, though her eyes betrayed a mixture of fear and determination. "It's too dangerous," Andre protested, concern evident in his voice. "We can't put you at risk like this." It was Lena who answered, her gaze fixed on Oliver and Mia. Perhaps this is exactly the opportunity we need. With their abilities, we could not only expose Mr. Müller's plans, but also demonstrate an ethical alternative to the use of these extraordinary gifts." Silence fell over the group as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Emma stood up, walking over to Oliver and placing her hands on his shoulders. "It has to be their decision," she said softly. "Oliver, Mia, do you really want to do this?" The two children exchanged another look before Oliver replied, "Yes, Mum, it's the right thing to do." The following days were a whirlwind of frantic preparations. While Mr. Müller and his team prepared for their grand demonstration, the resistance worked behind the scenes, refining its own plan. Oliver and Mia spent hours practicing, honing their control over their abilities. The rest of the group was divided between creating a support network for the children and preparing evidence that could be used to expose the true goals of the Global Harmony Project. On the eve of the demonstration, Andre found Oliver alone. In the makeshift training room, his eyes closed in deep concentration. "Son?" Andrew called softly. Oliver opened his eyes, a small smile forming on his lips. "Hi, Dad." Andrew sat down beside his son, feeling the weight of the responsibility that had been placed on Oliver's young shoulders. "Are you sure about tomorrow? There's still time to back out if you don't feel ready." Oliver shook his head, his expression serious beyond his years. "I'm ready, Dad. In fact, I think that's what my gift is for, to help people, to make a real difference." Andre felt a lump form in his throat, a mixture of pride and fear for what was to come. He pulled Oliver into a tight hug, wishing he could protect him from everything he was about to face. "Just promise me you'll be careful, okay?" Andre whispered. Oliver nodded against his father's chest. "I promise, Dad, we'll make it, I know it." The morning of the demonstration arrived with palpable tension in the air. The Institute's main auditorium was packed with board members, senior scientists, and of course Mr. Müller, who seemed to exude confidence as he prepared to present his revolutionary project. Behind the scenes, Oliver and Mia prepared, surrounded by members of the resistance who were putting the finishing touches on their plan. Lena handed each of them a small device. "This will amplify your abilities," she explained. "But remember, the real power is within you. Use it wisely." When Mr. Müller called Oliver and Mia onto the stage, silence fell over the auditorium. The two children stepped forward, their serene expressions masking the storm of emotions raging inside them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Müller began, his voice resounding throughout the auditorium, "we are about to witness the future of humanity. With the Global Harmony Project, we will be able to shape the destiny of the world, guiding it toward a future of peace and prosperity." He made a grand gesture toward Oliver and Mia. "These extraordinary children will demonstrate how we can predict and influence events on a global scale." It was at that moment that Oliver stepped forward, his eyes shining with an unearthly intensity. "Yes," he said, his voice surprisingly strong, "we will show you exactly what can be done with our gifts." And with that, Oliver and Mia clasped hands, activating the devices Lena had given them. The air around them seemed to vibrate with energy. Suddenly, the screens around the auditorium came to life, displaying not Mr. Müller's carefully prepared simulations, but a series of images and data that exposed the true goals behind the Global Harmony Project: mass manipulation, social control, and the suppression of individual freedoms. Chaos erupted in the auditorium. Mr. Müller, his face contorted with anger and shock, tried to stop the presentation, but found that all systems were beyond his control. Oliver, his voice amplified by technology and his own power, addressed the stunned audience. "What you are seeing is the truth behind the Global Harmony Project. It is not about harmony or progress. It is about control. But there is another way. With a gesture from Mia, the screens changed again, this time showing visions of a different future, one where extraordinary abilities were used for the common good, respecting the free will and dignity of all. We have the power to shape the future, Oliver continued, but not through manipulation and control. It is through understanding, compassion, and cooperation that we can truly make a difference. As Oliver and Mia continued their presentation, exposing the truth and offering an alternative view, Andre and Emma watched from the side, their hearts brimming with pride and hope. The future unfolding before them was uncertain, full of challenges and possibilities. But in that moment, seeing their son bravely face the darkness and offer light, they knew they had made the right choice. The battle was far from over, but the first blow had been struck, and with it, a new era of possibility opened, not just for Oliver and Mia, but for all those with extraordinary gifts and the world they would help shape. The silence that followed Oliver and Mia's performance was deafening. For a few moments, the entire auditorium seemed frozen in time, as if everyone was processing the shock of what they had just witnessed. It was Mr. Muller who broke the silence, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. This is an outrage, a deliberate sabotage of years of dedicated work. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The board members whispered fervently among themselves, their gazes alternating between the children on stage and the screens still displaying the damning evidence against the Global Harmony Project. Lena took advantage of the moment of confusion to step forward, her voice calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, what you have just seen is not sabotage, but the truth that has been hidden from you. Mr. Muller and his associates plan to use these children's extraordinary abilities not for the good of humanity, but for control and manipulation on a global scale. Chaos erupted in the auditorium. Voices were raised in protest and confusion, while security guards, uncertain of how to proceed, looked around nervously. In the midst of the confusion, Andre and Emma ran onto the stage, positioning themselves protectively next to Oliver, and Mia, Michael, and Clara did the same, forming a human shield around the children. Enough! The thunderous voice came from an imposing figure who stood at the back of the auditorium. It was Dr. Eleonora Santos, chairwoman of the Institute's board of directors. Her face was grave as she strode down the center aisle. Mr. Muller, these charges are extremely serious. I demand an immediate explanation. Mr. Muller, seeing his carefully constructed plan falling apart, attempted one last desperate move. Dr. Santos, this is clearly an attempted coup orchestrated by disgruntled elements within the Institute. We cannot allow a few confused children and their misguided parents to destroy years of vital scientific progress. But Dr. Santos didn't look convinced. Her eyes scanned the screens, absorbing the information displayed. Finally, she turned to Oliver and Mia. Children, are you willing to submit to an independent examination to verify the veracity of your claims? Oliver stepped forward, his voice surprisingly firm. Yes, Dr. Santos, we are ready to cooperate in any way we can to expose the truth. The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Santos convened a team of independent experts to examine the evidence presented by Oliver and Mia. Mr. Muller was placed under surveillance, barred from leaving the Institute or accessing any systems. While the adults dealt with the immediate ramifications of the revelation, Oliver and Mia were led into a private room, accompanied by their parents and Lena. The weariness of the demonstration was finally beginning to show on their young faces. You guys were amazing, Emma said, hugging Oliver tightly. So brave. Andre nodded, his chest swelling with pride. You two just changed the course of history. I'm speechless. Mia, usually so confident, looked a little shaken. What happens now? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Lena knelt in front of the two children, her gaze soft but serious. Now, my dears, comes the hard part. There will be many questions, many investigations. People outside the Institute will want to know about you, about your abilities. Oliver frowned, a shadow of worry crossing his face. We did the right thing, didn't we? Exposing everything like that? Absolutely, Andrew replied firmly. Sometimes The right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. But we're here with you every step of the way. The hours that followed were a blur of meetings, interrogations, and examinations. Dr. Santos, once convinced of the veracity of the allegations, acted swiftly and decisively. Mr. Mueller and his key collaborators were removed from their positions and placed under investigation. Meanwhile, news of what had happened at the Institute began to leak to the outside world. Journalists gathered at the gates, demanding answers about rumors of children with supernatural abilities and conspiracies of global control. It was at the end of that exhausting day that Dr. Santos called a meeting with the Fisher family, the Ricci's, Lena, and other key members of the resistance. "What happened today," she began, her tone solemn, "changed everything. We can no longer keep the Institute and its activities a total secret. The world outside is demanding answers." Andre felt Emma squeeze his hand, the tension palpable in the air. "What does this mean for our children?" he asked. Dr. Santos sighed deeply. "It means we have a choice to make. We can try to suppress all of this, which I honestly doubt is possible at this point, or we can opt for controlled transparency." "Transparency," Michael echoed, his voice thick with concern. "Wouldn't that put our children at risk?" "Not necessarily," Lena interjected. "If we carefully manage how information is disseminated, we can shape the narrative, show the world that these extraordinary abilities exist, but that they are being used for the good of humanity, not for control or manipulation." The discussion that followed was long and at times heated. There were valid concerns about safety, ethics, and the long-term implications of revealing the existence of individuals with superhuman abilities to the world. In the end, it was Oliver who offered the perspective that tipped the scales. "Ever since I discovered what I can do," he said, his voice calm but steady, "I've been asking myself why. Why me? Why us? Now I understand. It's not about hiding or controlling. It's about inspiring, showing the world that the extraordinary is possible and that we can use it to make things better for everyone." A thoughtful silence fell over the room after Oliver's words. Finally, Dr. Santos spoke. "I think we have our answer. We will move forward with controlled transparency, but each step will be carefully planned, with the safety and well-being of the children as our top priority." In the days and weeks that followed, the Institute underwent a radical transformation. Under the new leadership of Dr. Santos, and with the guidance of the resistance group, a new plan was formulated. The Institute would be restructured as an ethical research and development organization focused on using extraordinary abilities for the benefit of humanity. Carefully orchestrated press conferences were held, revealing to the world the existence of individuals with unique abilities. Oliver, Mia, and other children who felt comfortable participated in controlled demonstrations, showing how their gifts could be used to predict natural disasters, advance medical research, and solve complex global problems. The public reaction was mixed as expected. There was fear and distrust on the part of some, but also a wave of hope and fascination. The world was changing, and the Institute was at the center of that change. For the Fisher family, it was the beginning of a new journey. Andrew and Emma saw themselves not only as parents, but as advocates and spokespeople for a new era of human possibility. Oliver, with his wisdom beyond his years, became a symbol of hope for many. As he watched Oliver sleep peacefully after another busy day of interviews and demonstrations, Andre reflected on the incredible journey they had been on. From desperate parents searching for a missing son, they had become part of something much bigger than themselves. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges and unknown possibilities. But one thing was clear: together, as a family and as part of this new community of extraordinary individuals, they would face whatever lay ahead. And so, as the outside world continued to absorb the astonishing revelations about humanity's hidden capabilities, the Fisher family prepared for the next chapter of their extraordinary adventure. A chapter that promised not only challenges, but also the opportunity to truly make a difference in the world in ways they had never imagined possible. 5 years had passed since the day Oliver and Mia revealed to the world the existence of individuals with extraordinary abilities. The Institute, now known publicly as the Center for Global Advanced Research and Development, CGPDA, had become a beacon of hope and innovation. Andre Fischer, now the CGPDA's Director of Public Relations, looked out at the city of Rio de Janeiro from his office window. The familiar landscape seemed different somehow, not only because of the new technologies being developed downtown, but also because of the optimistic atmosphere that permeated the air. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come." "In," he called. Emma walked in, a warm smile on her face. "Ready for the big meeting?" she asked. Andre nodded, picking up his briefcase. "I can't believe it's already been 5 years," he commented, as they walked together through the halls of the center. The CGPDA had expanded considerably, now occupying a modern complex that blended harmoniously with the Rio de Janeiro landscape. Scientists, researchers, and individuals with special skills came from all over the world to collaborate on projects that were redefining the limits of what was possible. As they entered the main conference room, they were greeted by faces both familiar and new. Dr. Santos, still in charge of the center, smiled warmly at them. Oliver, now a young man of 17, sat next to Mia, both of them displaying a maturity beyond their years. "Welcome, everyone," Dr. Santos began, her voice carrying the weight of the importance of the moment. "We are here to discuss the results of our latest projects and define the next steps for the CGPDA." One by one, the leaders of different departments presented their reports. The advances were impressive. Cures for diseases once thought untreatable, climate forecasting systems with unprecedented accuracy, clean energy technologies that were revolutionizing entire industries. When it was Oliver's turn to speak, everyone in the room leaned forward in rapt attention. Over the past few years, his abilities had developed in astonishing ways, allowing him to not only process information at incredible speeds, but also visualize possible futures with remarkable clarity. "For the past few months," Oliver began, his voice calm but charged with intensity, "I have been working on a project that I believe is crucial to the future of humanity." He activated a hologram in the center of the table, showing a complex representation of planet Earth. Using a combination of our advanced technologies and the unique skills of several of us, we have developed a predictive model that allows us to anticipate and potentially prevent global crises years in advance. The room erupted in murmurs of amazement and excitement. Andre felt his chest swell with pride as he watched his son present something so revolutionary with such confidence and maturity. "But," Oliver continued, his tone growing more serious, "with that power comes enormous responsibility. We have to be extremely careful about how we use this information." Mia stood up, joining Oliver. "That is why we propose the creation of an international ethics committee, composed not only of CGPDA members, but also of global leaders, philosophers, and representatives of civil society." The discussion that followed was intense and profound. Questions of free will, global responsibility, and the ethical limits of intervention were hotly debated. Andre, watching the scene, couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From a desperate father searching for his missing son, he was now part of something that was literally shaping the future of humanity. After hours of debate, Dr. Santos called everyone to attention. "What Oliver and Mia are proposing is bold but necessary. We cannot simply accumulate knowledge and power without considering the ethical implications. Let us move forward with the creation of this committee, ensuring that our work always serves the best interests of humanity." As the meeting adjourned, Andrew pulled Oliver aside. "I'm incredibly proud of you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've grown to become not only an extraordinary man, but a true leader." Oliver smiled, hugging his father. "All of this was only possible because of you, Dad. You and Mom always taught me to use my gifts for good, to think of others before myself." Emma joined the hug, tears of joy in her eyes. "Our family has been through so much," she said softly. "But look where we've come." That evening, the Fischer family gathered in their apartment with the Riccis and Lena for a small celebration. As they talked and laughed, reminiscing about the challenges of the past and dreaming about the possibilities of the future, Andre couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude and hope. the world outside still faced enormous challenges. There were those who feared extraordinary abilities, who saw them as a threat, but there was also a growing wave of inspiration and global collaboration. The work of the CGPDA was slowly, but surely, changing the world for the better. Later, alone. On the porch, Andrew looked out at the city lights. He thought about the scared little boy Oliver had been when all this had started, and the amazing young man he had become. He thought about all the lives that had been touched and changed by the work they were doing. Emma joined him, lacing her, fingers with his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Andre smiled, pulling her close. "I'm thinking about how unpredictable life is, how a moment of despair can become the catalyst for something truly extraordinary." Emma nodded, leaning back against him. Who would have thought our search for Oliver would lead us on this incredible journey? And to think this is just the beginning, Andre reflected. The future that Oliver and the others are helping to shape is something we couldn't have imagined just a few years ago. As the couple gazed out at the horizon, a shooting star streaked across the night sky. It was a silent reminder of the endless possibilities the future held. Inside the apartment, the cheerful voices of Oliver, Mia, and their friends echoed. The next generation of leaders and visionaries ready to face the challenges ahead and shape a better world for everyone. Andre and Emma exchanged a look of mutual understanding. Their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more discoveries, more moments of doubt and triumph. But they would face it all together as a family, as part of this extraordinary community they had helped create. And so, as night fell over Rio de Janeiro, the Fisher family prepared for the next chapter of their extraordinary adventure. Chapter full of promise, challenges, and the thrilling possibility of making the impossible possible. The future, with all its uncertainties and wonders, awaited them, and they were ready to embrace it with open arms.